Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The world was different now. In the years since the last alien invasion, the skyline of New York had changed. What was once just a bustling metropolis had turned into something far more fortified. Hovercrafts zipped between skyscrapers, advanced weaponry lined the rooftops, and holographic defense grids shimmered in the sky. Tony Stark, billionaire, genius, and hero, stood on the balcony of Stark Tower, looking over the city. He'd done this. He'd given Earth the technology to defend itself, to stand tall in the face of any threat that dared to challenge it. But today something didn't sit right with him. Friday, give me a status update on the Steel Empire, Tony said, tapping the side of his earpiece. The AI assistant responded in her calm, soothing voice. The Steel Empire is fully operational, sir. Defensive satellites are in position across all major cities, autonomous drones are patrolling the perimeters, and the central AI control system reports full functionality. Tony nodded, taking it all in. The Steel Empire was his masterpiece, a global defense system designed to protect humanity from any alien or rogue force. After the devastation caused by Thanos and his armies, he knew Earth needed something more than just the Avengers. They needed a defense network that could anticipate and neutralize threats before they became catastrophic. This was his answer. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He had invited world leaders to Stark Tower today for the formal announcement, the unveiling of the final stage of the Steel Empire. It should have been a proud moment for him, but it felt more like standing on the edge of a precipice. Any word from the big guy? Tony asked, his tone lighter now. If you mean Mr. Kent, no, sir. Superman hasn't responded to any of your requests for a meeting. Tony sighed, knowing why. Clark Kent had been against the Steel Empire from the start. They hadn't clashed outright. Not yet. But the tension was palpable. Superman believed in humanity's innate ability to rise above, to defend itself. Tony admired that in theory, but the world had changed. The threats they faced were no longer just from within. They were galactic, otherworldly, and brutal. He wasn't willing to bet Earth's future on hope. Turning from the balcony, Tony walked inside the penthouse, the large screens flickering with global news coverage. His own image was plastered on nearly every channel. Stark's controversial Steel Empire nears completion today as world leaders gather in New York for the unveiling. He tuned it out, let the pundits talk. What he was building would save lives. No, it would save the world. The doors to the penthouse slid open, and a familiar figure walked in. Tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a simple button-down shirt and jeans, Clark Kent looked out of place amidst the futuristic technology. The two men stood there, the air between them thick with unspoken tension. Tony Clark began, his voice calm but firm. We need to talk. Tony didn't turn around right away. Instead, he stared out at the city, at the shimmering grid that protected it. I thought you'd be here sooner. He said, I expected you to try and stop this. Clark walked further into the room, his gaze sharp but not hostile. I don't want to stop it, Tony. I want to understand why you think this is the only way. Tony finally turned to face him, his expression guarded. You, of all people, should know. You were there when New York was torn apart, when entire cities were wiped off the map. We can't afford to rely on hope anymore. We need something real, something tangible. And what happens when people forget how to fight for themselves? Clark asked, crossing his arm. What happens when they start depending on you, on machines, to solve all their problems? What then, Tony? You were creating a world where humanity no longer needs to protect itself. Tony scoffed, walking over to the bar to pour himself a drink. You make it sound like a bad thing, isn't it? That the goal isn't the whole point of what we do to make the world a safer place. A safer place, yes, but not a place where people forget how to stand on their own 2 feet. Clark's voice was rising now, but it wasn't anger, it was frustration. Technology is powerful, Tony, but infallible. What happens when it fails? What happens when the Steel Empire isn't enough? Tony downed his drink in one quick motion, slamming the glass down on the bar. Then we'll build something better. That's what we do. Clark stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. No, Tony, that's what you do. But the rest of the world isn't you. They can. You just build a suit of armor when things get tough. You were taking away their chance to be strong. The two stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their words hanging in the air. Tony knew Clark was right in a way, but the stakes were too high to take a risk on human resilience alone. I am not asking them to be weak, Clark, Tony said, his voice softer. Now, I am giving them a chance to survive. I can sit back and watch another invasion tear through this planet. And I can watch you turn the world into a place where people no longer believe in their own strength, Clark replied, his tone resolute. Before Tony could respond, a holographic alert flashed across the room. Friday's voice chimed in, "Sir, the world leaders have arrived. They were waiting for you in the conference room." Tony exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Guess it's show time," he muttered, turning to leave. But before he stepped out, he looked back at Clark. "We were not done here." Clark watched as Tony left the room, his mind racing. He wasn't sure how to stop this. Tony says vision for the future was compelling, but it was dangerous. Clark believed in humanity, believed in the strength of ordinary people to rise above adversity. But Tony believed in machine. The conference room buzzed with activity as the world saw the most powerful leaders gathered around the circular table, holographic maps and schematics floating in the air above them. Tony Stark stood at the head, commanding the room with his usual bravado. The Steel Empire's final phase was about to be unveiled, and it was clear from the faces in the room that many of these leaders were eager to see it come to light. "Ladies and gentlemen," Tony began, his voice booming across the room. "Today marks the beginning of a new era. The Steel Empire isn't just a defense system. It's sealed for the entire planet. A network of autonomous drones, satellites, and AI-controlled weaponry designed to protect Earth from any threat, foreign or domestic." He waved his hand and the holograms above the table shifted, displaying a massive array of armored drones, missile defense systems, and energy shields that covered the globe. "With this system in place, we'll be ready for anything," Tony continued. "No more invasions, no more catastrophes. We can finally sleep soundly knowing that we are safe." The room erupted in applause. But amidst the cheers and praise, Clark remained silent, standing in the back of the room. His eyes scanned the faces of the world leaders, men and women, who were all too eager to put their faith in machine. He couldn't blame them after everything the world had been through. The promise of safety was a tempting one, but at what cost? As the presentation continued, Clark's gaze shifted to Tony. He saw the confidence, the pride, but he also saw the burden. Tony had taken the weight of the world on his shoulders, and Clark knew it wasn't sustainable. When the applause died down, a voice broke through the crowd. "What about Superman?" one of the leaders asked. "What does he think about all this?" All eyes turned to Clark, and for a moment the room fell silent. Tony's expression tightened, but he didn't intervene. This was Clark's son's moment. Clark stepped forward, his presence commanding even without the cape. "I think Tony has done something incredible," he began, his voice calm but firm. "But I also think we were putting too much faith in technology. Machines can protect us, but they can't make us strong. They can't make us brave. Only we can do that." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but Clark continued, "We need to be careful. If we become too dependent on the Steel Empire, we risk losing something far more important, our ability to defend ourselves." Tony cut in, his voice laced with impatience. "With all due respect, Clark, this isn't about making people weak. It's not about keeping them alive." Clark turned to face Tony, his gaze steady. "I know that, but we can sacrifice our humanity for the sake of survival. There has to be a balance." The room fell into an uneasy silence. Tony clenched his jaw, his frustration evident, but he didn't push back any further. Instead, he simply nodded. "Let's hope we never have to find out which one of us is right." Later that night, as Tony worked alone in his lab, he couldn't shake the conversation with Clark. The Steel Empire was everything he'd ever dreamed of, a way to protect Earth without risking more lives. But what if Clark was right? What if he was building a world where people stopped believing in their own power? He sighed, staring at the holographic display of the Steel Empire. It was perfect, but perfection didn't always mean it was the right answer. Just as Tony was about to shut down the display, an alert flashed on the screen. "Malfunction detected in Sector 7, Friday," Simon's voice announced. Tony frowned. Malfunction, that's impossible. Before he could investigate further, more alerts began to flood the system. Malfunctions across multiple sectors, autonomous drones going offline, defense grids shutting down unexpectedly. "What the hell is going on?" Tony muttered, quickly tapping into the system to regain control. But it was too late somewhere. Deep within the Steel Empire, something or someone was sabotaging the entire network. And Tony Stark was about to find out just how fragile his empire really was. Tony Stark's mind raced as he navigated through the network, says Diagnostic. Every system failure, every alert was like a ticking time bomb. It didn't take long for him to realize that this was no mere glitch. Someone was actively dismantling the Steel Empire's and infrastructure. The AI-controlled drones, once his greatest asset, were now drifting aimlessly, their programming corrupted. The defensive satellites meant to shield the Earth from extraterrestrial threats were now spinning out of control. He worked furiously at his console, typing commands and rerouting systems, but the damage was escalating too quickly. Friday, initiate emergency protocols, lock down all critical systems. I need to know the point of origin for these breaches. Emergency protocols engaged, Sir, scanning for breach origin. Friday responded. I'm detecting multiple points of infiltration. The primary breach is originating from an unknown source within the central AI control system. Tony's eyes narrowed. He knew there was only one person who had both the motive and the means to sabotage the Steel Empire. Lex Luthor. The man had always been a thorn in his side, but this was beyond anything he anticipated. He quickly donned his Iron Man suit and launched himself out of Stark Tower, streaking across the sky toward the central AI control hub, a facility located miles away in a remote sector. As he approached, he saw the facility in chaos. Security systems were down, and several drones that should have been protecting the perimeter were now crashing into the walls, their programming overridden. Tony landed with a heavy thud, scanning the area. His sensors picked up a strange pulsing signal. Something was definitely tampering with the core system. He moved quickly through the facility, his corridors following the signal. He reached the main control room, where he found a scene of utter destruction. Servers were sparking and smoking, and a figure was hunched over the central console, typing furiously. It was Lex Luthor, his face illuminated by the flickering lights of the malfunctioning screen. Luthor, Tony's voice boomed through the suit speakers. I should have known you'd be behind this. Luthor looked up with a cold smile. Oh, Stark, I see you. Then found me. I must say I am impressed by your diligence, but I am afraid you read too late. Tony's eyes narrowed. What are you planning? Luthor stood up, turning to face Tony. I am simply ensuring that your precious Steel Empire falls apart. It was always destined to fail. You see, I had a little help, a few backdoor accesses to your system. And now with the global defense network in disarray, I'll be in a position to offer solutions for a price. Tony's fist clenched, Yuri, putting the entire world at risk. What if there's another attack? What if the real threat strikes while your sabotage is still active? Luthor shrugged. That's precisely the point. By creating chaos, I can swoop in with my own defense solution. And in the process, I'll make a tidy profit. It's a win-win for me. Tony's mind raced. He had to stop Luthor and restore the Steel Empire before it was too late. Yuri not getting away with it. Luthor laughed. Oh, but I am, and I suggest you hurry if you want to salvage anything. The more time you waste here, the more systems will fail. With that, Luthor activated a device that sent a surge of energy through the control room, creating a barrier that prevented Tony from reaching him. Tony gritted his teeth and assessed the situation. He had to break through that barrier and stop Luthor before the damage became irreparable. Using his suit's advanced weaponry, Tony fired a series of precise shots at the barrier's send power node. The barrier flickered and weakened, giving him just enough time to breach it. As the barrier dissipated, Luthor's smug expression faltered. Tony lunged at him, tackling him to the ground. Yuri done, Luthor, Tony said, pinning him down. You were gonna pay for this. Luthor struggled but knew he was beaten. You may have won this battle, Stark, but the war is far from over. Tony secured Luthor's restraints and turned his attention to the damaged system. He worked furiously to restore the Steel Empire's functionality, rerouting power and reprogramming the affected systems. It was a race against time, but he couldn't afford to fail. As he worked, he couldn't shake the feeling of dread. The Steel Empire was vital to Earth as safety, but it was also a symbol of his own hubris. He had put all his faith in technology, and now that same technology had been used against him. The balance between relying on advanced systems and maintaining human resilience was a fragile one. And with Clark Kent's warning echoing in his mind, Tony knew he had to find that balance or humanity would pay the price. Hours later, the control room was finally back under control. The alarms had stopped and the systems were gradually coming back online. Tony wiped sweat from his brow and sighed in relief. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the real work was just beginning. Friday, a report on the global status, Tony said, collapsing into a chair. Global defensive systems are stabilizing, sir. There are still some residual malfunctions, but they're being addressed. The Steel Empire is operational once again. Tony nodded. Good, but we have to ensure this doesn't happen again. I need to review all security protocols and fix the vulnerabilities Luthor exploited. As he prepared to leave the control room, Tony's thoughts turned to Clark Kent. He needed to talk to him to address the concerns that had caused their rift. The Steel Empire might be his vision, but it had to be a vision that included a balance, a recognition of human strength as well as technological prowess. He soared back to Stark Tower, feeling the weight of his responsibility more than ever. The world needed protection, but it also needed to be resilient. And as he looked out over the city, Tony knew he had to find a way to ensure that the Steel Empire was not just a shield, but a reminder of humanity's strength and ingenuity. The battle against Luthor was won, but the real challenge was ensuring that the Steel Empire served its purpose without overshadowing the very essence of human resilience it was meant to protect.